year teaching at Vine, and the last 3 years I taught Latin. And unfortunately, I won't be teaching Latin this year, but I'm still a resource for all of you and also all of our teachers who will be teaching Latin in the classroom. We do Latin here from K4 through 6th grade. This is our curriculum. Song School Latin is K through 2nd grade, and that is really just a introduction to language, to the language of Latin, and through songs, activities, a lot of games. There's no grades. It's just fun. It's supposed to get them exposed to what is language, why do we learn language, can you guys see these connections between these words that look similar sometimes to our English word for it. And then in 3rd grade, 2nd or 3rd grade, depending on the year, but this year I think 3rd grade and 4th grade they get into the Memoria Press series. So that's Prima Latina through 2nd form. That is really when they start focusing on vocabulary memorization and the introduction to grammar forms, so learning grammar forms through chants and still some songs, but chants, and then vocabulary quizzes and stuff. So mainly my goal for you guys here, I know not all of you teach, or not all of you have kids that are in those ages, but whether you're a 5-day parent or a 2-day parent, you should know why we teach Latin at Vine, because not all schools teach Latin. I didn't actually know Latin before I taught it, and so if you're thinking, well, okay, my kid's going to take Latin, but that's them, that's on their teacher, I don't know anything, I don't know how to pronounce these words, I don't know what this is, or maybe you think, well, why are we learning Latin when, nobody speaks it, it's a dead language, couldn't we teach them French or Spanish or something that is more practical? Well, I kind of came along that journey of understanding why it is that we teach Latin and actually loving it. And so I want to encourage all of you to know why we teach Latin and also be able to embrace the unknown and show your students, your children, that you are willing to learn something new and that you're excited about something new, even if it seems a little scary and confusing at first. So first of all, why we teach Latin. So there's some obvious answers and there's some not so obvious answers. One of the obvious answers is that English is a derived language from Latin, so we have lots of Romance languages that come from Latin, and English specifically is a Latin and Germanic language. So vocabulary often is really helpful through learning Latin. We can see root words, deduce what a word might mean that we don't know because it has a Latin root. And so that's one thing we're trying to develop with our students is vocabulary, but also it supplements their grammar. A lot of the stuff that Ms. Hanson was talking about with Shirley grammar, they're learning the same things in Latin. They're learning what a subject, how to recognize the subject, how to recognize the verb, how to recognize the direct object through endings of the words, and just recognizing what part of speech it is they're able to tell. And so it's supplementing their grammar and their English classes as well. The next thing, if they go on to learn another language, for example, here at Vine we teach Spanish in the upper level in rhetoric, and so they are very similar. Learning one language always helps build for learning another language, even if it's not a Romance language, but particularly Romance languages, they do help. Next, we've got terminology. That would be another one that maybe you hear often, would be like law, medicine, philosophy, theology, art, literature, all these things that they might go into later. They'll hear a lot of terminologies that have Latin roots. So something that maybe is not as obvious would be training in the scientific method. So something we do once they get into like 1st form, 2nd form, is parsing. Anybody know what the word parsing means? It's like taking a word or a sentence and you're trying to crack a code almost. You're looking at endings and you're figuring, is this 1st person, 2nd person, 3rd person? Is this a subject or the verb? So they're learning how to observe. They're learning how to put into practice the scientific method of comparing these endings and being able to determine what's the role of this word in the sentence based off of what I'm observing. So that's another thing. And then it also just is all over our culture. Anybody have a dollar or a coin on them? Anybody have a dollar? If you look at our seal on the dollar, and this is something the kids love to do in class because they get really excited. I'll get it back. Okay. So if you see our little seals here on the ribbon of the eagle, it says "e pluribus unum," which means one out of many. So that Latin saying is kind of a motto of our country, talking about the diversity of the country as it came together as many people from many different places, but all united in one. And so that is not only a cool little, they all can go home and ask their parents, can I see $1? Can I show you what I learned in Latin? But they're also getting to, talk even about the unity in Christ and all of the diversity that we have as all being many different members coming from different backgrounds, but all united in Christ. And so Latin is just one way that we can show our culture as a country and also our culture in the church in Christ. And then lastly, the educational virtue. This is one thing where it's true among all the subjects that we teach, where you are learning how to have attention to detail. You're learning discipline through the study of Latin. And so they're learning problem-solving skills, even if they're not going to maybe either remember all their Latin or they're not going to go on to be Latin scholars. They're learning skills that they'll take on into other classes and into life. And so we really believe in just the educational virtue that Latin establishes. So how can you guys help them as their parents with Latin? That would be the next slide. Sorry. Thank you. The biggest thing as parents of any of those ages would be to buy into Latin and what we're doing. And I know for a fact that most often the kids will model the attitude that their teacher or their parents have towards a certain subject. So if there's fear or confusion or even just keep that away from me, I don't want to have anything to do with it. If any sort of attitude towards a subject from a parent, the kids will often pick up on that same sort of fear and confusion and think it's harder than it really is. So even if you don't know anything about Latin, like I didn't know anything about Latin my first year teaching it, I could still come to the students and say, hey, I'm learning this with you. This is really exciting, and I love learning new languages, and I love learning new things. And if you don't pronounce things correctly, that's okay. There's different pronunciations, and nobody speaks Latin, so nobody's going to correct you. They can always go to their teacher and just say, hey, my mom and I weren't sure about how to pronounce this word, and that just creates good communication and flow between families and and teachers in the 2-day. But also this is very applicable for 5-day as well, because the kids will come home with their words to study, and it just makes it a lot more fun when parents are involved with them reviewing their words and practicing. So the second tip I have is with vocabulary, that you review frequently, briefly, and cumulatively. Those 3 things are really important, because students that will review 5 or 10 minutes every day, their vocabulary, are guaranteed, I think, to do better than a student that the night before spends an hour studying. And I think they'll also be more confident, they'll own the words, and they'll also have more fun. But not spending a lot of time just sitting there. A lot of the spelling stuff also applies with Latin when they're learning to spell words. We're not just going to go write the Latin words 10 times. Make it fun. That brings me to the third thing. With anything in the grammar level, we're building a foundation. We want this foundation to be something we can build on. And so chants, songs, jingles, games, activities, things that are going to help it stick in their brains long term, and that they're going to enjoy, so that they're learning to love learning, and then that will continue when they get into upper level Latin, where they're starting to parse sentences and they're actually translating, and they're getting into the more fun. It's fun if you have a foundation. It's scary if you don't have that foundation. So that's why I think the ways that you can make it fun would be you're driving to school and you're quizzing. Maybe if you have 2 kids, you're having them compete who can say the translation faster, or you're writing in shaving cream the spelling of the words. There's so many different ways that you can make learning the vocabulary fun. And then the last thing I would encourage you guys to do is to encourage your students to see the connections that they can make between subjects. So that's part of what we're doing here all across the board, is integrating all the subjects, making connections between math to science to fine arts to Latin. And so the kids get so excited when they see how something that they learned in history relates to something they learned in Latin, or they'll just be like, Miss Bolt, guess what our spelling word was this week? It was stellar, and stellar is like Stella, and that means star. And they really, when they pick up on it, they get really excited. And so I encourage them to see those connections across all the subjects. That's all I have. Thank you.